Hello and welcome back to the Sleepy Historian. The air is still tonight, and the moon hangs like a silver disk in the velvet sky. A perfect evening to let our thoughts drift down the long, quiet river of time. Find a comfortable spot. Let your breathing slow, and allow the gentle currents of the past to carry you away. We often think of history in grand terms, of pharaohs and pyramids, of epic battles and sweeping dynasties. But sometimes, the most profound stories are found in the quiet spaces in between, in the unspoken gestures and the silent symbols. Did you know that the way a soldier dressed might have told a story not just of war, but of loss? A quiet, personal memorial worn on the field of battle. Tonight, we're not looking for grand monuments. We're searching for the subtle language of grief, hidden in the warrior fashion of ancient Egypt. So, close your eyes if you wish. And let's travel back together, to the land of the pharaohs, to ask a quiet question: how did a soldier say goodbye? The world of ancient Egypt was one of profound and public emotion when it came to death. Herodotus, the Greek historian, described it with wide eyes. Scenes of men and women roaming the city, their faces and chests covered in mud, beating their chests and wailing in communal sorrow. When the head of a household passed, the women would smear their heads, and sometimes their faces, with mud. They would leave the body in the house and wander the town, their garments girded up to expose their breasts, striking themselves as they went. The men, too, would beat their chests in a separate procession. It was a visible, audible, and deeply physical expression of loss. For the wealthy, this was amplified. Professional mourners, often depicted in tomb art, were hired to heighten the funereal performance. These were the kites of Nephthys and Isis. Women who would pull their hair, cry aloud, and sing dirges for the deceased, ensuring their passing was marked with the appropriate level of dramatic grief. This was a society that understood the catharsis of shared sorrow, that believed the path to the afterlife was paved, in part, by the tears of the living. But what happens when death occurs far from home, on a dusty, foreign battlefield, under a hostile sun? What happens to this ritualized grief in the rigid, disciplined world of the pharaonic army? A soldier's life was governed by order, by the drumbeat of the march, the command of an officer, the cohesion of the unit. There was little room for the chaotic, personal performance of traditional mourning. Tearing one's uniform or smearing one's face with mud would be an unthinkable breach of discipline. The very nature of military life demanded a suppression of such individual displays. The unit had to move on, the campaign had to continue. And yet, the soldiers were still Egyptian. They were still sons, brothers, and friends. The bonds forged in the crucible of training and combat are legendarily strong. The loss of a comrade, a brother-in-arms who stood shield to shield with you against a chariot charge, must have been a deep and terrible wound. So, if the traditional avenues of grief were closed to them, did they find another way? Did the language of mourning simply fall silent, or did it learn to speak in a different tongue? A quieter, more subtle dialect, woven into the very fabric of their warrior identity. Let's first look at the man himself, the Egyptian soldier of the New Kingdom, the height of Egypt's imperial power. What did he wear? His attire was, above all, practical. The hot climate dictated simplicity. He wore a linen kilt, pleated and sometimes reinforced with leather strips for protection. His feet were clad in papyrus or leather sandals, if anything at all. His torso was bare, showing the hardened physique of a career warrior. He carried a large, cowhide-covered shield, tapered at the top, his primary defense. His weapons were the tools of his trade. A bronze-tipped spear, a composite bow, or the fearsome sickle sword known as the khopesh. On his head, he might wear a padded linen cap or simply a wig, often secured with a fillet. It is a uniform of brutal efficiency. There seems to be no room for sentiment. There are no pockets for keepsakes, no lapels for a commemorative pin. At first glance, the Egyptian military machine appears to have stamped out individuality in favor of a unified, functional whole. But we must look closer. beyond the broad strokes of the uniform and into the finer details. Was there any space for personal expression? Perhaps. We see variations in the quality and decoration of the kilts. Officers certainly had more ornate gear. But for the common soldier, personalization was likely limited to the small things, the things that could be worn without impeding function. This is where our search begins. Not in the cut of the cloth, but in the small, potent objects a man might carry with him into the fray. The answer to our question may not be about fashion in the sense of clothing, but about adornment. The quiet, powerful language of amulets and charms. These were not mere decorations. In the Egyptian worldview, they were essential technology, pieces of applied magic, as vital to survival as a sharp spear or a sturdy shield. And it is within this world of magical protection that the seeds of memorialization may have been sown. To understand the Egyptian soldier, you must understand his belief in Heka. The fundamental concept of magic, the power that infused the universe and could be harnessed through symbols, words, and rituals. Every Egyptian, from the pharaoh to the farmer, lived within this magical landscape. For a soldier whose life was a daily gamble against violent death, Heka was an invisible shield. He would have been adorned with a collection of amulets, each serving a specific purpose. The most common and powerful was the Ujat, or the Eye of Horus. This symbol represented healing, restoration, and protection. It was the eye that the god Horus lost in his battle with his uncle Set, and which was magically restored by Thoth. To wear it was to invoke this myth of wholeness and recovery, a potent charm against injury. Another was the Ankh, the symbol of life itself, a powerful affirmation of existence in the face of death. The Djed pillar, representing the backbone of the god Osiris, offered stability and endurance. The scarab beetle, or Khepri, was a symbol of rebirth and regeneration, a promise that the sun would rise again, and that life could emerge from death. These were the standard tools of magical self-preservation. But let us now introduce the ghost of a fallen friend. Imagine two soldiers marching side by side for years. They have trained together, shared rations, stood together in the shield wall. Then, in a chaotic skirmish, one of them falls. The survivor is left with his grief, but also with a heightened sense of his own mortality. What might he do? In this moment of loss, the purpose of his amulets could subtly shift. The ankh he wears is no longer just for his own life. It becomes a silent prayer that his friend might find eternal life in the field of reeds. The scarab beetle is not just for his own regeneration. It is a hope for his friend's rebirth in the next world. The Eye of Horus is not just to protect him from harm. It is a plea for his friend's spirit to be made whole and complete on its journey through the underworld. This is not a change in fashion. It is a change in intent. The object remains the same, but its meaning is deepened, doubled. It now serves two souls, the living and the dead. A soldier might even add another amulet to his string. A second Ujat eye, perhaps. To an officer, it would look like a sensible, pious precaution. But to the soldier, that second eye was not for him. It was for the friend who no longer had eyes to see. A magical proxy to help guide his spirit through the darkness of the Duat. This is the beginning of a secret language, a mourning practice hidden in plain sight, disguised as piety and self-preservation. This idea of a shared spiritual burden is reinforced by the structure of the Egyptian army itself. During the New Kingdom, the army was organized into large divisions, each named after one of Egypt's principal gods, Amun, Ra, Ta, and after the Ramesside reconciliation with the Hyksos god, Set. These were not just administrative labels. They fostered a powerful sense of corporate identity and divine patronage. A soldier in the division of Amun fought under the banner of Amun, believed he was protected by Amun, and that his victories brought glory to Amun. This created a profound sense of brotherhood. They were the braves of Amun, a family bound by a shared divine protector. Each division carried a standard into battle, a pole topped with an icon of the patron god. This standard was the heart of the unit, its rallying point, its soul. Losing the standard in battle was the ultimate disgrace. Now, consider the aftermath of a major battle. The division of Ra has suffered heavy losses. The survivors gather around their standard, the familiar sun disk of their patron. The standard is a symbol of their continued existence, their victory, but it is also now a silent witness to their losses. Is it possible that some ritual was performed around these standards to honor the fallen of that specific unit, perhaps a temporary addition? A strip of dark linen tied to the pole, or a specific incantation recited by the unit's priest? While we have no direct evidence of this, it aligns with the Egyptian way of thinking. Objects, especially sacred ones like a divine standard, could be imbued with meaning and memory. The standard that was once just a symbol of the god's power now also becomes a repository for the memory of the men who died defending it. It becomes a portable monument, a focal point for the unit's collective grief and pride. In this way, the mourning is elevated from a personal act to a communal one, strengthening the bonds of the survivors. They are no longer just grieving for a friend. They are grieving for a fallen brave of Ra, and their shared loss reinforces their identity as the remaining chosen of their god. The very symbols of their military structure could have been adapted to become vessels of remembrance. Nowhere would this silent language of grief have been more necessary than in the aftermath of the Battle of Kadesh. Fought around 1274 BC, it was a colossal clash between the Egyptian Empire under Rameses II and the Hittite Empire. It was a battle of unprecedented scale, involving tens of thousands of soldiers and thousands of chariots. The official Egyptian account, carved in monumental reliefs on temple walls from Abu Simbel to Karnak, tells a story of singular, heroic victory. It depicts Rameses, abandoned by his troops, single-handedly charging the Hittite lines and scattering them through his divine strength and the favor of Amun. It is a masterpiece of royal propaganda. But the reality on the ground was far bloodier and far more ambiguous. The division of Ra was ambushed and shattered early in the battle. The division of Amun was swarmed. The fighting was desperate, chaotic, and brutal. While the Egyptians ultimately held the field, the cost was immense. Thousands were dead on both sides. An Egyptian soldier who survived Kadesh would have witnessed carnage on a scale previously unimaginable. He would have seen friends he had known for years cut down by Hittite axes or trampled by chariots. He would have stepped over the bodies of his comrades to hold the line. When the dust settled, the official narrative broadcast from the top was one of glorious triumph. But the personal narrative, the one whispered between soldiers around the campfires, would have been one of horror, survival, and profound loss. How do you mourn in the face of such a state-sponsored celebration? You cannot wail and tear your clothes when the pharaoh is declaring a magnificent victory. To do so would be to contradict the divine king himself. This is where our theory of hidden mourning becomes most compelling. In the wake of Kadesh, a veteran soldier's gear might have become a quiet testament to the battle's true cost. He might have tied a small red jasper amulet, a stone associated with the blood of Isis and protective magic, to the hilt of his khopesh, not for himself, but for the man whose khopesh now lay rusting on the plains of Syria. He might have commissioned a scribe to add a small, barely noticeable line of protective hieroglyphs to the rim of his shield, a spell for the safe passage of souls, dedicated to the friends he lost in the ambush of the division of Ra. These acts are invisible to the official record. They would not be carved on a temple wall. They are private, personal, and potent. They allow the soldier to reconcile his personal grief with the public demand for celebration. He can march in the victory parade, his face a mask of discipline, while his heart performs its own secret memorial service, expressed through the silent, magical language of the objects he carries. Compounding the grief of losing a comrade was a deep, uniquely Egyptian terror, the fear of an improper burial. To To the Egyptians, the body was not merely a vessel to be discarded at death. It was an essential component for the afterlife. It had to be preserved through mummification, and it had to be interred in a tomb with the correct rituals, spells from the Book of the Dead, and grave goods to sustain the soul on its perilous journey. The soul itself was complex, comprised of many parts, including the ba, depicted as a human-headed bird, which could travel between the tomb and the world of the living, and the ka, the vital life force that needed sustenance from offerings. A soldier who died at Kadesh, or in some remote Nubian campaign, faced the dreadful possibility of being left on the battlefield. His body would be devoured by scavengers, his name forgotten. Without a body, without a tomb, without offerings, his ba and ka would have no anchor. His spirit, the Ak, would not be able to join the gods in the field of reeds. He would face a second and final death, oblivion. This was a fate more terrifying than being slain by an enemy spear. It was the complete erasure of one's existence. A living soldier would have been acutely aware of this spiritual danger, not just for himself, but for his fallen friends. This adds another layer to our interpretation of his personal effects. The symbols he wore were not just about mourning a loss. They were an active, magical intervention. He was attempting to provide for his friend what the battlefield could not. By wearing an amulet in his friend's name, he was, in a magical sense, acting as a surrogate tomb. He was creating a focal point for his friend's wandering ba. The small offering of water he poured on the ground before a meal, done in the name of his lost friend, became a magical substitute for the grand offerings his friend should have received in his tomb chapel. The soldier's own body, adorned with these commemorative symbols, becomes a mobile, living memorial, a walking ritual dedicated to ensuring his comrades' spiritual survival. This transforms an act of grief into an act of profound loyalty, a magical rescue mission that extends beyond the veil of death. The little tassel tied to his shield is no longer just a decoration. It is a lifeline thrown to a drowning soul in the dark waters of the Duat. So, where can we look for clues to support this idea? We must become historical detectives, examining the artifacts with a new eye. Look at the votive stele left by soldiers and officers at sacred sites like Abydos, the cult center of Osiris, lord of the underworld. These stone tablets were left as prayers and offerings. While many are dedicated to the life and health of the soldier and his family, some are dedicated to comrades. They ask Osiris to grant a good burial and offerings in the afterlife to a fellow officer or a group of soldiers. This shows that the principle of caring for a comrade's soul was an established part of the military ethos. Now, let's turn to the equipment itself. While most organic materials like linen and leather have decayed, the metal and stone components survive. Look at the bronze axe heads or spear points. Occasionally, they are inscribed. Usually, it is with the owner's name or his unit. But could a small, almost hidden symbol have a deeper meaning? A tiny incised ankh near the hilt of a dagger could be a personal mark of remembrance. Consider the tomb of a military man. He is often buried with models of weapons and shields, or sometimes his actual, battle-worn equipment. When we see a shield in a tomb, we see it as a symbol of his profession. But what if we look closer at its painted patterns? The geometric designs, the rosettes, the divine figures. Could the specific number of rosettes on a shield model correspond to the number of campaigns he fought, or perhaps, more poignantly, the number of close friends he lost? This is speculative, of course. We can never know for sure. But it is not impossible. The Egyptians were masters of symbolism and numerology. They believed numbers had magical power. A pattern that looks merely decorative to us could have been a complex record of a soldier's life and losses, a code understood only by him and his guards. The very act of placing his shield in his tomb could be a final gesture of bringing his memories, and the men connected to them, with him into the afterlife. The shield that protected him in life now protects the memory of the fallen in eternity. The mourning, then, was likely a ritual of quiet adaptation. It was not a public display, but a private conversation between a soldier, his guards, and the memory of his friend. Imagine a veteran soldier, years after the wars have ended, now serving as a temple guard in Thebes. He is older, his body scarred, his hands resting on the haft of a spear. Tucked into the leather wrappings of the spear is a small, smooth blue faience bead. It is not part of his uniform. It is small enough to be ignored by his superiors. To anyone else, it is a trifle, a good luck charm. But to him, it is everything. He remembers the day, 20 years earlier, when his friend gave it to him before a charge, saying it was a piece of the sky to remind them of the Nile when they were far from home. His friend did not survive that charge. And so, for 20 years, the soldier has carried this bead. It has been with him through other battles, through the long march home, through the quiet years of peace. It is a piece of his friend's spirit, a tangible piece of memory. Every time his hand closes around the spear, he feels the smooth bead and remembers. This is not warrior fashion. This is warrior heart. It is a form of mourning that is enduring, personal, and completely invisible to the historical record. It is in these imagined, personal rituals that we can find the most likely answer to our question. The mourning was not in a standardized uniform change, but in the unique, personal choices a soldier made. The extra knot he tied in the fringe of his kilt, the specific way he arranged the amulets on his necklace, the small, faded symbol he painted on the inside of his shield, hidden from all other eyes. These were the quiet monuments to the fallen, far more personal and perhaps more powerful than any grand public cenotaph. It was a grief that had to be carried, so it was integrated into the very tools of survival, a constant, silent companion in a dangerous world. So, as we drift towards the end of our journey tonight, what have we found? Did Egyptian warrior fashion mourn fallen comrades? The answer, like so many things in the distant past, is not a simple yes or no. We have found no evidence of a mourning uniform, no ancient equivalent of a black armband or a reversed spear. The discipline and uniformity of the pharaonic army would not have permitted such an overt display. But that does not mean that mourning did not happen. Instead, it seems far more likely that the Egyptian soldier expressed his grief in a way that was perfectly in tune with his culture. He turned to magic. He repurposed the existing symbols of protection and life, deepening their meaning to serve both himself and his fallen friend. He imbued his weapons and armor with the weight of memory, transforming them from simple tools of war into personal relics. His mourning was not worn on his sleeve for all to see, but carried in his heart and expressed through the secret, symbolic language of Heka. It was a grief hidden in plain sight, disguised as piety, concealed in a pattern, tucked away as a small, personal charm. It was a testament to the enduring power of friendship, a refusal to let a brother's soul face the darkness of oblivion alone. The Egyptian soldier's greatest tribute to his fallen comrade was not a display of sorrow, but a stubborn, magical fight to ensure his friend's eternal life. And that, perhaps, is the most profound form of remembrance there is. Thank you for joining me here at the Sleepy Historian. May your rest be peaceful, and your dreams be filled with the quiet, starlit whispers of the past. Good night.